Okay, in this video, I'm going to share. First of all, I welcome you to the channel, which is ACCA Concepts, Problems, and Solutions. And I'm covering the topic which is about capital structure and the cost of capital. And right now, with the help of an example, we're going to discuss how the project should be financed. It should be financed entirely by equity, or it should be financed entirely by debt, or by the combination or mix of both. So let's see how we can solve out this problem. Hubbard, an all-equity food manufacturing firm, is about to embark upon a major diversification in the consumer electronics industry. First of all, Hubbard is a food industry, now is actually moving in or actually working in the consumer electronics industry. Its current equity beta is 1.2. Hubbard is 1.2, while the average equity beta of electronic firms is 1.6, while the electronics industry's beta is 1.6. Gearing in the electronics industry averages 30% debt, 70% equity. Corporate debt is considered to be risk-free. Corporate debt is considered to be risk-free. RM is 25%, RF is 10%, and corporate tax rate is 30%. What would be a suitable discount rate for the new investment if Hubbard were to be financed in each of the following ways? Entirely by equity, by 30% debt and 70% equity, by 40% debt and 60% equity. So we're going to see it. First of all, we are covering the location, which is ACCA, Chennai, India, and also the subject is financial management, and we are dealing with capital structure and cost of capital. This is how you're going to deal it. So first of all, in A part, beta for the electronics industry is what? Beta is 1.6. Okay, so that would be the project financed entirely by equity. To reflect the business risk, obviously, of the new venture, we should start with the equity beta of the electronics industry. We know that we first have to gear, then we have to ungear, and then we have to actually calculate the RM by CAPM method, and then we have to calculate the WACC. But right now, we are actually working towards the ungearing, and ungearing will be done with the help of what? The relative beta, which is of firms, electronics firm industry beta, and let's see how we can use that beta to ungear, and we can actually remove the financial risk element. Okay, normally these are the financial risk and the business risk are the two risks we have discussed in our videos as well. What are the three risks? Business risk, the financial risk, economic risk. So we have a transaction risk, we have deal with that as well. But right now, just for the case of the project financing, this needs to be done. So as our project is to be ungeared, we should then remove the financial risk element. Okay, so this is done. This is how beta asset is beta of equity into VE into plus VD1 minus tax. Beta equity is 1.6, and VE is, which is the gearing by equity, is 70%, that would be 0.7, and that would be 0.7 plus by debt would be 30%, 1 minus 0.3, that would be 0.3, and that would be 1.23 beta asset. Okay, so this is how it has to be done. Beta asset is equal to 1.23. And then we have calculated entirely by equity, and now we're going to put this beta asset, the pure cost of equity, and hence which is normally WACC. In our equity case, we're then going to calculate what? The KE, which is the cost of equity, calculated by CAPM method. sorry to say RM in my earlier video, it is not RM, it is KERF plus beta into RM minus RF. So that is 10% already been mentioned. Beta is what? Beta is 1.23 already actually been done. 25% is RM minus RF is 10%. So that would be around about 28.45% is KE. Okay. So this is how it has to be done. And let's see, we have calculated the project should be evaluated what at the rate of this entirely by equity. That is the point, entirely by equity, KE. And then we're going to do the second part, that would be the project financed by 30% of debt and 70% of equity. Actually, in this case, you observe equity beta, obviously BE of the electronic industry would reflect the level of business risk and financial risk of the project. Obviously, both are now being considered. In equity, we normally actually deal with the financial risk, and in debt, we normally just deal with the business risk. We have already calculated the beta asset. In beta asset, normally this is we're going to discuss how we're going to actually deal with it, and reflecting the business risk and the financial risk of the project. So no adjustments are therefore required. So to obtain a suitable discount rate, we actually going to do simply weight the cost of equity and the cost of debt. We are actually going to just taking out the weighted KE into VE, VE plus VD, and then it would be KD into VD, VE plus VD. So KE would be what? RF plus beta into RM minus RF, and that is 10%, beta is 1.6, RM is 25% minus 10%, that would be 34%. And KE is what? RF1 minus T, that would be 10%, and 1 minus 0.3, that would be 7% KE. The suitable discount rate for project. Suitable discount rate for project would be 34%, this one, and that is the cost of equity multiplied by the proportion, which is 70%, 0.7, and plus 7% multiplied by 0.3, so that would be 25.9% discount rate. This is how you're going to calculate the discount rate when the project would be what? Financed by 30% of debt and 70% of equity. So 25.9% was this, and when it was done entirely by equity, that was 28.45%. So that was just by entirely by equity, and reflecting the financial risk. And here we have actually reflected the business and the financial risk together, and we have obtained the discount rate with the help of the weighted cost of the equity and the cost of the debt. That is normally the discount rate, which is the weighted average cost of capital, and we are actually obtained this through this one. Okay, so now the project would be financed by 40% of debt and 60% of equity, the part C. So what in this, obviously in this case, the equity beta, which is normally this is the third part, by 40% of debt and 60% equity, And what we're going to do, we're going to actually equity beta of the electronics industry reflect a lower level of gearing than that for the proposed project. Okay, so the simplest procedure is to take a two-step procedure approach to the gearing adjustment. So the gearing adjustment will be done how? First of all, it will be 40% debt and 60% equity. Okay, and then it has to be done. We have calculated 1.6. Okay, and the 1.2, the Herbert's actually was, we have to calculate first of all what the asset beta for the electronics company. So the asset beta would be done, how would the asset beta would be done? (1.23). This is the asset beta, and this is a measure of the pure actually systematic risk of electronics companies, and we now going to adjust this pure beta in the light of the given financial gearing ratio. So what we're going to do, we're going to adjust this pure beta in the light of the given financial gearing ratio. Okay, this is the pure beta. So work out the equation backwards to calculate the cost of equity for an electronics company with 60% of equity and 40% of debt. So what we're going to do, we have the beta asset, we have calculated the beta asset in our first part, which is 1.3, okay, for the electronics industry. And now we put the value in this equation, which would be beta asset, and then we're going to have the beta E. Then we're going to multiply 1.23 and we get the beta E. That is how it has to be done. Okay, so working like this, how are we going to actually do it? Step 2 is what? So step 1, we have calculated this is 1 beta asset, and now we have to work it out to find the beta equity. Okay, so how it will be find? How we're going to find it? Beta of asset is equal to beta of equity into VE, and that is VE plus VD 1 minus T. And 1.23 is equal to beta of equity into 0.8, and that is 0.6 plus 0.4 and 1 minus 3 of 9. Okay, so this is how it has to be done. So with the help of this, we're going to calculate the beta equity. That would be 1.80. Okay, now this is 60% of equity, 40% of debt. The exchange and the corporation corporation tax is what, 30%, I believe. So that is how it has to be 30. So beta equity is this. Now we're going to find the cost of the equity for such a firm, and let's see how we're going to calculate it. RF plus beta, and that is now equity, and RM minus RF, and then we're going to 10% plus 1.8, 25% minus 10%. That would be, doing it the calculation, you can find it, that would be 37% KE. So this is how you're going to find the cost of the equity, and the cost of the debt would be RF into 1 minus T, that is 10% and 1 minus 30, so that would be 7% cost of debt. And a suitable discount rate for the project would be, what would be the suitable discount rate? WACC, let's see, it would be KE into VE plus VD plus KD and multiplying by VD over VE plus VD. So that would be 37%. This whole equation is what it's been 0.6 and plus 7% into 0.4, so that would be 25% WACC. Okay, that would be the weighted average cost of capital. So what we have done with this is obviously weighted average with the help of this, and in the first part, if you remember, and the second part, we also calculated normally the discount rate with the help of what? With the help of this example, or this you can say part, and we applied it so that we can get our understanding towards this. So what we did, that we find out KE, okay, and then that was put in this 0.7 and 0.3 was a distribution, 7% was the cost of equity by cause of this, and 34% was this one, okay, KE. 30% was KE and this was KD, cost of debt. Okay, that is how you calculate it. This is not KE, this is D. This is how you, this for putting out the values, you find out this is what 30%, that was 70%. Equity was 70% and that was 30%. That is how we put on the values. We have calculated a separate method, probably a much more simple method in one of our earlier videos, just gearing and de-gearing, but probably that was a separate example. And in this example, you can use this method or either one of the other method used in some of the other videos, especially in WACC calculation. You can go through and visit that video as well, and you can see how that WACC has been calculated. We have used just the other way of actually calculating, first of all, the percentages and then applying the suitable discount rate for that given project. So that is how you're going to use it. In the third part, which is the normally step C, that is project financed by 40% of debt, and that is also 60% of equity. And that is how you're going to calculate. One beta asset is, we have calculated with the help of part 1. Okay, beta asset is part 1. And also we have calculated beta of equity, and we have also calculated KD, we have calculated KE, and afterwards what we have, this is KE and this is KD, putting out the values, 37% and 7% of 60% of equity, and this is 40% roundabout. Just putting out the values in total, you will be able to find out the whole discount rate. Okay, so you can, because in first part we have to find out the beta in reference to the given this one, 30% of this and 30% of this. You can easily find out the beta with the help of this beta asset. Okay, just putting out the values over here. Okay, but obviously with the help of because this was the entire calculation by equity. That is why we have to ungate first of all the relative and put out that ungate beta into our KE, which is CAPM method, and we're going to find out the cost of equity. But that was entirely by equity. We don't have any proportional mix, but with the help of the proportional mix, we entirely have found this 30%, 70%, 40%. This is also given here, but it was in the relative term. But with the help of this, obviously this needs to be done, because now this is in reference to the Hubbard. Okay, so in reference to the Hubbard, you have to follow this and method, and you have to follow the calculate the following or the three parts, which has been done as in front of you. So I hope I have explained enough for the weighted average cost of capital. When we are talking about a company or which has a project, which has a project in other industry, and that industry gearing is all being provided, your company's beta beta value has been provided, the industry's beta value has been provided, in which you are interested to work in. Okay, and when you have given the beta values, you will be able to find how the project would be financed. Obviously, should it be financed entirely by the equity, or it should be financed entirely, equity mean entirely funded by the finance sources, which is normally the all capital resources. And when you're talking about the debt financing, normally in which the loan or the lenders normally come in they are the sole providers of the finance. So how are we going to assess that project if it's in front of you, and how are you going to assess whether it has to be done entirely with the help of the finance, entirely with the help of the equity, or it should be equity, or it has to be combination of debt and equity. So this example purely helps us to find the project financials purely done on the basis of equity, purely done on the basis of debt and equity, and with the given proportion, or the given actually set of percentages that will help us to extract or find out the given cost of capital, which you may actually refer as the weighted average cost of capital as well. So this is how it has to be done. This is how it has to be applied when you are talking about the project financing, and you are actually working in context of forecasting as well. So that's example purely help when you are working with some other industry and some other project. So let's see what we have for another video. Till then, take care and have a nice day.